It's sort of a variety of things, from my book Speak Low, from a more recent book, Double Shadow, and from a book that's coming out next year called Silver Chest. And they're just kind of smashed together, and we'll see what happens. This first one's very short. It's called Just the Wind for a Sound Softly. Oh, speaking of sound, so is this fine?
Check the switch, it should be working.
Like, can you hear me now? I mean, if you can, then I'll do a switch right here. How's that? Is that good?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh. Okay. Thank you, George. Just the wind for a sound softly. There's a weed whose name I've meant all summer to find out. In the heat of the day, dangling pods hardly worth the noticing. In the night, blue flowers. It's as if a side of me that he'd forgotten had forced into the light briefly. A side of him that I'd never seen before. And now I've seen it. It is hard to see anyone who has become like your own body to you. And now I can't forget. This is called The Darker Powers. Even if you're right, and there's in fact a difference between trouble unlooked for and the kind of trouble we pursued ruthlessly until at last it was ours, what will the difference have been finally? What I've called the world continues to pass for one. The room spins same as ever. The bodies inside it do, flightless but no less addicted to mastering, to the dream of mastering the very boughs through which they keep falling without motion almost, that slowly. It seems they'll fall forever, my pretty consorts, to whom sometimes, out of pity, not mercy, for nothing tender about it, I show the darker powers I've hardly shown to anyone. Feel the weight of them, I say, before putting them back, just behind my heart, where they blacken and thrive. One of the things I don't do well between poems is speak, because I often say stupid things. So that was my thing to say between poems. This is in 3 sort of mini parts. It's called Mirror, Window, Mirror. Yes, any sky at night when the flickering of snow lightning gently punctuates it, whatever it is, when it's not bewilderment or daring, and not fear either. Also, the mottled bark of sycamores in autumn for where the skin was like that. Yes. But more like arousal? Or more instead like the mind, just before the idea of arousal courses bluntly through it. That part about the body asking for it to be broken into. Is that the first or last part? This next one is called Storm, and I'm going to do something that I actually hate to say, the context, like how it came about, though ideally that's not even noticeable in the poem. It was just a picnic on the banks of the Mississippi, which I didn't know came up here this far. So that's kind of nice to see it and think, almost home, sort of. Storm. From the waist down at least, nothing unfamiliar. Cypress trees, the catappa, its seed pods hanging like shadow icicles, and the light around them, and the bodies that enter the light and leave it, your own among them. But as when the body seems most to want, impossibly, to step free of itself, oblivion of wish, of wishing. About sanctuary, how over time it makes the birds come closer, how that's different from trust, isn't it? What the fuck do you think you're looking at? He says softly. What a thing to say. The mind protecting itself by shutting down an intimacy that most likely won't be returned. Why expect it? As if that were the mind's chief purpose, to resist a fall, though falling's what the body does best, is quick to rise for it, moving toward you with all the ceremony of many wings at once outspread, a holiday, descending. The dark adjusts itself, settles its wings inside you. The shadows that struck the dark open and fold like hope, a paper fan, violence in its pitch and fall like waves. Above them, the usual seabirds, their presumable indifference to chance, its blonde convergences. As when telling cruelty apart from chivalry can come to seem irrelevant, or not anymore the main point. He touches himself here and here, directive, turns his face away. It can look like ransom. Now it looks like privilege, now recklessness, now triumph, gravel and blood, humiliation, lovely, now strict refrain. He taketh my hand in his. See, no picnic. Actually appears, but there was some creepy person who appeared and I wrote about him. It's useful. This is called Sterling. Soon we'll wake. We'll see what's real. Soon the woodcock startling suddenly up again, as much out of hunger as from fear. I'll tell you everything, whose clouds these are, who says so. I lie under the stars the way people used to do, what was meant by enough, in blood, in cinders also. Now the weather passes like truth, and the truth like weather, from merely elusive to at last resistant. Lopsided, battered, but still serviceable. What is memory? A shield? A shelter? The stable boy leading the horse gently out to the reckless horseman. Restless, the toss of hawthorn shadow across the horse's brow. Now, to counter the strangeness of that, this one's more story-like. So this plan, sort of. This is called Until There's Nothing, Just the Sea, a sea of leaves. We'd been up to the meadow. The wildflowers that had seemed everywhere thinned gradually as we ascended. Think of an unbuttoned shirt falling soft in stages from a man's back, shoulders first, now the strength of a good arm showing more and more, and the chest, of course, the meadow cresting until we came to where the horses had been buried, crosses of thick vine, weathered and rope-like over two of them. Above the third, the presumed favorite, a cross of horseshoes welded together, painted white. Not out of boredom, but because I've always found it difficult to resist looking down from a great height. I looked away, down on the world that we left behind us. How unimportant it seemed, and at the same time, how very detailed. The skim and dart of blackbirds, in their swiftness, seeming to foil their own shadows. They seemed to want to. And below that, the blighted orchard, whose trees could, in almost any light, make salvation look like nothing so much as a script that, in the end, though perhaps reluctantly, they've been written out of. So much for the world. It was then he turned to me, as if turning were an art, one he'd lost the mastery of, or as if some part of him, the part more wounded, were caught inextricably in the kind of dream in which one has been asked to say the difference between mercy, compassion, and pity, and to one's surprise, one does know the difference. The answer comes as a star, clear, attainable, blindly, a bit unsteadily, stutter of gratitude, sway of despair, the hand rises, as if at last to reach for it. Howdy.
Yeah.
How are you? Yeah, there was something to say about that poem, but I don't remember what it was. Except that it's a North Dakota poem. That's what happens when you stumble across graves of horses in the field. Luckily. Fascination. Guttering in its stone urn from a century by now too far away. The candle made of the room a cavernousness. The shape of the light getting cast upward onto the room's ceiling became a kind of moon, some overlooked last round of desire, unclaimed, searching. There are places still that no moonlight ever quite conquers. A thickness of brush, the crossed limbs of cathedral pines defend the dark, inside which, beneath it, the trapped fox has stopped mutilating its own body to at last get free, has stopped trying, consigns the rust-colored full length of itself to the frosted ground. Almost tenderly. It had the heft of old armor, like a breastplate of bronze, like a shield on hinges. It swung apart like a door. Inside it, the sea was visible. The sea, and on the shore, a man, stripped, beaten, very gently, tenderly almost, as if to the man, to calm him, but in fact to no one, the sea was singing. Here, in the deepening blue of our corruption, let love be at least one corruption we chose together. But the man said nothing. Why not call restlessness our crown and our dominion, sang the sea. But the man was a brokenness like any other, moving until it fails to move, the way over time suffering makes no difference. His wounds were fresh, still open. Where the light fell on them, they flashed, like the sea. I didn't notice until picking up poems from these books that, because I always think that they're all the same. But a major difference is the poems have become shorter and shorter. I'm not sure what that means, that I can no longer sustain a thought for very long. So like reading that one about going up in the meadow and seeing horse graves, I probably never write anything that long anymore. I'm not sure why that is. And in this book, Don't Shout, the poems are quite short. But I guess as they say, it's not about size. So, or doesn't have to be. This is called The Need for Dreaming. As a scar commemorates what happened, so is memory itself but a scar. As in, given hunger, which is endless only until it isn't, He destroyed what he could. And then? So the lover enters the beloved, enters and withdraws. So a yellow-crested night heron wades into view, then out. Useless? It gets harder to say. Like signs of struggle in a field where nothing stirs, the past can seem everywhere. I think to be useless doesn't have to mean not somehow mattering. Years now, and still, I can't stop collecting the strewn shells of spent ammunition where I come across them. Carefully, I hold each up toward what's left of the light. Just thinking. Just sort of a frightening thing to do on a stage. That's not to. Thank you, Emily, for the water. I didn't know it had ice too. This is called civilization. But there's an art to everything. How the rain means April and an ongoingness like that of song until at last it ends. A centuries-old set of silver handbells that once an altar boy swung, processing. You're the same wilderness you've always been, slashing through briars the bracken of your invasive self. So he said, in a dream. But the rest of it, all the rest, was waking, more often than not, to the next extravagance. Two blackamoor statues, each mirroring the other, each hoisting forever upward his burden of hand-painted, carved-by-hand peacock feathers. Don't you know it? Don't you know I love you? He said. He was shaking. He said, I love you. There's an art to everything. What I've done with this life, what I meant not to do, or would have meant maybe had I understood, though I have no regrets. Not the broken but still flowering dogwood, not the honey locust either, not even the ghost walnut with its gnawed branches whose every shadow is memory, memory. As he said to me once, that's all garbage down the river now. Turning, but as the utterly lost, because addicted do. Resigned all over again. It only looked, it must only look like leaving. There's an art to everything, even turning away. How eventually even hunger can become a space to live in. How they made out of shamelessness something beautiful for as long as they could. That line, that's all garbage down the river now, is a friend of mine says that all the time about anything. You know, you lost your wallet, well, that's all garbage down the river now. And he was quite annoyed when it turned up in a poem that he doesn't appear in. And he's not acknowledged, and feels that he should get some kind of like royalties, vast royalties from poetry that he should get. But anyway, he now thinks it's not good to be friends with poets because they steal your phrases and claim them for themselves. Too bad. This is called Immaculate Each Leaf and Every Flower. Title's a little over the top now, but at the time I liked it. Immaculate each leaf and every flower. And everywhere the smaller birds again noising, filling steadily all the cracks between spells of rain. As if song could still mean something useful. Or a kind of pleasure that, like forgiveness came easily, and summer storm that forgiveness is passed quickly through. And the undersong that has been your own voice saying, no, no, I'm not afraid. What we cannot do, what we cannot undo, all the work we must do. As for ruin, yes, but faintly. The gray of doves in shadow. This poem has a stolen title, The Life You Save. I guess there's a phrase, the life you save, maybe your own. Or was that just an ad from childhood for seatbelts? I feel like it was. I think it might have been for seatbelts because they had just been invented. Again, seatbelts. And there was something about that. Anyway, the poem's just called The Life You Save. After the pine fields, there's the marsh. You can see it from here. And after that, history ending, myth as it starts to stir. And after that, just the turning back again. Nothing you won't know already. The pine field, the marsh, and the reeds too. The reeds that grow there? Yes, and the reeds that grow there. Beautiful, invasive. They jostle in the smallest wind. Soon it will be as if nothing had ever happened. And that's what you get when you climb on the roof of a house under construction with a child. You keep saying, and after that, and after that. So you just start saying things like myth as it starts to stir. That quiets them down quickly. It's very effective. I'm very good at inner child department with words. Okay. As we roll towards the end. So the mind, like a gate, swings open, is the name of this title. Well, poem, that is. So the mind, like a gate, swings open. When it comes to what eventually it must come to, don't forget to say to yourself, has it come to this again already? Look a little lost maybe, but unsurprised. Sometimes it feels like being a carousel horse, but with all the paint gone strange-like, all the wood gone driftwood, all the horses I've corralled inside me set free, confused now, because now what? The snow felt like hope when it's been forsaken, just before the wind shifts. Then the wind shifts, the snow flies upward. I love you means what exactly? In the end, desire may turn out to be no different from any other song. Sing and be at last released from it. Not so long ago as I'd like to think, I used to get drunk in parking lots with strangers. We'd park, we'd drink, and didn't think what to call it, the rest that came after. What is a thing like that worth calling? He took me into his arms. He held me. I know longing's a lot like despair. Both can equal everything you've ever hoped for, if that's how you want it. Sure, I get that. What's wrong with me? I used to ask, but usually too late, and not meaning it anyway. He touches me, or I touch him, or don't. This next poem, the title comes from a line from Thoreau's Walden. I don't remember the sentence, it's a very long sentence. The summary in it is the phrase, "in this world to be lost." And that's the title of this poem, "In this world to be lost." Get dressed. We should leave now. As for the so-called waters of persuasion, why not cast what's left of belief upon them? As when we come to love a thing for no better reason than that we have found it, but find it once for love. Have you ever done that? Some asleep-looking birds say that's dead, really, lying dead in the straw grass, the grass, and the imaginary conversation it makes with itself. Or any man in tears whispering, "If I go down on whoever tells me to, is it prayer? Isn't it? Did I pray enough?" Waves, then waves in reverse. Maybe that's all we're given. Maybe stamina is just a fairer form of stubborn, and maybe not. As for autumn, that predictable drama will soon enough, presumably, be again beginning. Get dressed, and upon the confusion, unconfusion that the waves make, let's cast what's left. All right. I wasn't going to read this poem, but because Erin, of whom I'm kind of proud, I have to say, she was already wonderful and gifted before she met me. But then she came to Washington University. So, I like to feel some part played in that. Anyway, she told me that there had been some mention of sadomasochism. I don't know, something. This doesn't really have that, but maybe in mild form. So, anyone who had a heart, which, yes, is a song that was famously sung by Dionne Warwick. And it's by Burt Bacharach and Hal David. Yes, Hal David. But they have nothing to do with the poem. I just was stuck for a title. Anyone who had a heart. I know a man who routinely asks that I humiliate him. It's sex, and it isn't. Whatever. For him, it's a need. The way brutality can seem for so long a likely answer that it becomes the answer, a kindness even. And I have always been kind, for which reason it goes against my nature to do what he says, but there's little in nature that won't, with enough training, change. After it's done, if the weather's good, we tour his garden, heliotrope, evening primrose. Proximity is one thing, he likes to say. Penetration, another. And I have learned that's true, though which is better depends. Whose life? What story? The relief of snowmelt, or the flooded fields again? We go down to the stables to visit the horses that, when they were nothing, just shivering foals still, he once asked me to give names to. How long we've traveled, he and I, more like drifted, really, and how far. More black than all the sorrows and joys put together that I can remember when I try remembering, which I mostly don't. Now the foals, they're stallions, call out fanfare, adoration. Like broken kings, they lower their heads, then raise them. And I have two more poems left, and it seems like now it's safe to say thank you that you stayed in the room. Though I know there's still a chance. This is called "But Waves, They Scatter." I truly don't know why it's called that. I mean, truly. But maybe I just like it. But waves, they scatter. From beneath the ice field, longing looks up at the lovers who, variously meandering, stalling or not, fucking or not, guess nothing of him. torturer sometimes, known also to have been a savior eventually, hard passage to a life worth the hardness. You would think longing lived in a space warmer than an ice field. You would think so. Tragedies are happening everywhere in the world, beside things that aren't technically tragedies, though they include suffering, pain, death in its more humiliating versions, to remind that some of us will be less spared and some will not. Up through the ice field, longing watches the lovers, who in turn look down or away, laughing. Each time they miss the ice field for the flowers that, despite the cold, somehow grow there. Distraction's the bluer and more abundant flower, black at the edges. Joy is the other. Now I'll end with this pretty short poem called Silver Chestnut. Unafraid is what we were, I think, and then afraid, though it mostly seemed otherwise. I opened my eyes, I saw, I closed, I shut them. The usual morning glories twist up through banks of gone wild by now holly. Crickets for song, morphos for their glamour, which is quiet, blue and quiet. You, the dark that nothing, not even the light, displaces. You, who have been the single leaf that won't stop tossing among the others. For you. Thank you very much.